صلى على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. And in regard to the life of our fourth Imam alayhi salam, many of us know him in the context of Karbala and in the context of what transpired after Karbala from Kufa and from Kufa to Sham. But there's not, unfortunately, emphasis that we give in regard to the remainder of the life of our fourth Imam alayhi salam, even though we know that he actually lived for 34 years after the tragedy of Karbala. So, and the portion of his imamah that we pay attention to, which is just those few months or few weeks of his life, are only a very small portion of the fact that this imam actually had a 34-year imamate period, which was one of the longest periods of imamate that we have. And so there are many other aspects of his life that we can discuss, but there's one area that I'm hoping that we can perhaps look at, which is not usually explored very well in regard to our fourth Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, and that is specifically his relationship with the Holy Quran, with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This issue of the relationship with the Quran, we see that sadly this is one area where we as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam are often lacking in specifically. We have a very minimal, a very formal relationship with the Holy Quran, and unfortunately most of the time it's limited to special occasions. It's limited to, for example, when it's limited to, for example, when someone gets married or someone passes away. And on a daily basis, there's not that regular engagement with the Quran that we're expected to have. We see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Furqan of the Holy Quran that on the day of judgment, one of the things that is going to happen is that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he's going to complain to Allah, and he's going to say, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا, that, oh my Lord, my nation abandoned this Quran and treated it as something mahjur, as something that was not of a lot of value. So certainly we don't want to be among those who are being complained about by the Prophet to Allah in this way. And particularly as followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that just like all the other Imams whom we claim to follow, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam also, he was among the Quran Natiq. He was also among those who are the talking, walking, and speaking Quran. And indeed, we have the famous hadith that we all are familiar with, وَلَنْ يَتَفَرَّقَ حَتَّى يَرَدَ عَلَيَّ الْحَوْض, where the Prophet says that I am leaving among you two heavy things or two important things, and they will not separate from each other. They will not be separated from each other until they meet me at the pond, at the pond of Kawthar. So it's important for us to understand that the relationship with the Quran is proportional to the relationship with the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We accuse others and we say that you always talk about the Quran, but you don't give any importance to the family of the Prophet. And that's certainly true in many contexts, but that goes both ways. That if we are emphasizing the Ahlul Bayt, if we place a lot of importance to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, but we don't pay importance to the Quran, then that is also not an ideal state to be in. So when it comes to our fourth Imam, when it comes to Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wassalam, we have a beautiful hadith where the Imam says something very powerful. And just this hadith, we can spend a lot of time just reflecting on it. And it's really one of those hadiths that we should just hear it and spend a lot of time personally reflecting. The Imam says, لو مات من بين المشرق والمغرب لما استوحشت بعد أن يكون القرآن معي. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, he says that even if everyone in the east and the west were to die, in other words, the world were to go through some apocalypse or something like that were to happen, where there was no one left. And if I were the only human being, I was the only person left in the world, right? Or we think of like these kind of, sci-fi or fantasy scenarios where a person is abandoned on some deserted island and there's no one else there. The Imam says, لو مات من بين المشرق والمغرب, even if every single person in the world, in the east and the west, were to perish, لما استوحشت بعد أن يكون القرآن معي. He says, I would not feel, even if all the people in the east and the west were to die, I would not feel any level of fear and worry and anxiety and loneliness as long as the Quran was with me. Meaning that, yes, these human connections are great and we need them to a great extent, but the Imam is saying that my relationship with the Quran is such that even if there was no human being left in the world and I was the only person left, I wouldn't feel this overwhelming sense of loneliness. I wouldn't feel wahshat. Lima istawhashtu. I would not feel wahshat. I would not feel this anxiety and terror because the Quran would be with me. So now, of course, that's a very high level of relationship with the Quran, and perhaps we might never get to that level, but it should serve as an inspiration for us that behooves us in developing and improving our relationship with the Holy Quran. When it comes to developing our relationship with the Holy Quran, there are three areas that we can focus on, and just briefly, I'd like to look at some sayings and examples from our Imams, particularly from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, in each of these areas. The first area where we should focus and try to, inshallah, improve our relationship with the Holy Quran is in the area of recitation. We have a narration from our sixth Imam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, where the Imam says, Al-Qur'anu ahdullahi ila khalqi. The Quran is a covenant. The Quran is an oath that God has given to His creation. فَقَدْ يَنْبَغِي لِلْمَرْءِ الْمُسْلِمِ أَنْ يَنْظُرَ فِي عَهْدِهِ وَإِنْ يَقْرَأُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ فِي كُلِّ يَوْمٍ 50 آيَةٍ. The Imam says that this Quran is an oath, is a covenant that God has given to His creation. Therefore, it is necessary for a Muslim person to respect this oath, to uphold this oath, and the minimum way to uphold that oath and that ahad is to recite 50 verses from that Quran every single day. The minimum that our sixth Imam is telling us is that on a daily basis, we should fulfill this oath with Allah by giving us this beautiful gift of the Quran. The least that we should do, the minimum that we have to do, is 50 verses on a daily basis. Now, when we hear this, sometimes that's an overwhelming thought. Okay, we can start slowly and we can work our way up, right? We can try to do it however is possible, right? A lot of times we think of the ideal way of doing things, and then when we can't, then we just give up. Okay, if I can't do 50 verses a day, I can do 40 verses a day. I can start with 40. If I can't do 40 a day, I can start with 30 a day. If I can't do 30 a day, I can do 20 a day. If I can at least do 10 verses of the Quran a day, 5 verses even a day. Even if I open the Quran and read one ayah every single day, make it a habit after Fajr prayer, after Zohar prayer, before going to bed, when you wake up, whatever it is, some sort of regular, consistent schedule. And even if I recite one ayah of the Quran a day. But the Imam is saying there has to be regular recitation of the Quran, and the ideal we should get to is at least 50 ayah, 50 verses every single day. But if I can't do that, at least I start small and I say I'll do 5 verses a day, I'll do 10 verses a day. And inshallah, over the next few months and then maybe a year or 2 years, I'll get to that level of 50 verses a day, right? Now, when we think about doing these things, again, many times, we think of the ideal way of doing it. So I have to, have wuzu, I have to sit down on the musalla, I have to sit toward Qibla and then recite Quran. Yes, that's ideal. That's the best way of doing it. But if I can't do that, then at least recite the Quran when you're driving, for example. Play it in your car and then repeat the verses after, right? Recite it, when you're doing things around the house, when you're doing chores, when you're doing, these kind of things. If we have mistakes, for example, in our recitation, if I don't know how to recite things correctly, now there's all these different apps that are available for free, or maybe for nominal cost, that can teach you proper tajweed, that can teach you proper recitation. There's tons of content on YouTube and all these different places that's available. So there's so much that we have that's available to us in order to improve our recitation and in order to make our recitation consistent. Now there's even YouTube videos, but they have the Arabic and they have transliteration. So if you can't read Arabic, you can at least read the transliteration. You're still, it's like you're reciting Arabic, but you're reading the transliteration in case you're not able to, read the Arabic script. But coming to our fourth Imam, the one whom we're speaking of tonight, we have narrations which say, كان علي بن الحسين صلوات الله عليه اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد أحسن الناس صوتا بالقرآن. The narration says that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was أحسن الناس صوتا بالقرآن. He had the best voice of all the people at that time when it came to recitation of the Quran. Meaning his Quran recitation was the most beautiful of anyone who was alive at that time. And then it's even more powerful. The narration continues. وَكَانَ السَّقَّاؤُونَ يَمُرُّونَ فَيَقِفُونَ بَابِهِ يَسْمَعُونَ قِرَاءَتَهُ. When the Imam would sit in his house and he would recite the Quran, or for example, sometimes he would go and sit on the roof of his house and he would recite the Quran. His recitation was so beautiful and so powerful that the people who were walking in the streets outside his home, they would pause and they would stand there and they would just want to stand there and listen to his qira'at. That's how beautiful the recitation of the Imam was. That's how much of an attachment that the Imam had to the Quran, that it wasn't just reciting Quran, but it was reciting in such a beautiful way that people in the streets would stop and stand outside his house and just stand there and listen to the voice, this beautiful voice that's coming of this person reciting the Quran. Another very powerful example that we have is one of the companions of our fourth Imam alayhi salam by the name of Sa'id bin Jubair, rahmatullah alayh, one of the narrators of hadith and a scholar of the time. In Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith by Ayatollah Khoy, rahmatullah alayh, when he's describing Sa'id bin Jubair, he says, in regard to Sa'id bin Jubair, we're not talking about the Imam, we're talking about the companion of the Imam. He says, وَيَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ فِي رَكْعَتَيْنِ. In terms of the quantity of how much he used to recite the Quran, it says about Sa'id bin Jubair that when he would be doing his nafilah prayer, he would recite the entire Quran in 2 rakats of prayer. Right? We're not talking about Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. We're talking about a student of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Right? That a student of the Imam had this level of attachment to the Quran, had this level of consistency and time that they would give to reciting the Quran. Right? So it's not just something that is something that we tell children, yeah, recite the Quran. No, this is something for all of us, of regularly, daily reciting the Holy Quran. And there's many, many narrations, that we have that talk about the importance and the benefits of reciting the Quran. We have a narration from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says, "Inna hadhihi al-qulub latasda'u kama yasda'u al-hadid." He says, the Prophet says that the hearts, the souls of human beings, we start to rust the way that metal becomes rusty. So then how do we fix it? Then the Prophet says, وَإِنَّ جَلَاءَهَا قِرَاءَةُ الْقُرْآنِ. And the way to remove that rust of the hearts, remove the rust of the souls, is through recitation of the Holy Quran. So there's, again, much more to be said on that topic, but that's the first point on how we can improve and increase our relationship with the Holy Quran, is through daily recitation of the Quran, minimum 50 verses, but if I can't get to 50, then I do 20 or 10 or 5, and then slowly work my way and build it up to 50 on a daily basis, inshallah. The next area when it comes to our relationship with the Holy Quran is understanding and implementing the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب. Right? This Quran, this book has been revealed. We revealed it to you for what purpose? So that you can ponder on it, so you can understand it, so you can reflect on its teachings. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah says we have revealed this very eloquent and very easy to understand Quran for what purpose? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you may ponder on it, so that you may think about it, so that you may reflect on it. So it's not just enough to recite the Quran, but we should also read the translation and understand the meaning of what we are reciting. Right? Again, going back to our fourth Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, Ayatul Qur'ani khaza'in, that the ayat of the Quran are treasures. فَكُلَّمَا فَتَحَتْ خَزَانَةَ يَنْبَغِي لَكَ أَن تَنْظُرَ مَا فِيهَا. And therefore, if you wish to open these treasures, then you have to reflect and ponder on the meaning of these ayat, right? If we look at the example of the Imam himself, how he used to recite the Quran, we just talked about how beautiful his voice was, how melodious his recitation of the Quran was. But now when it comes to, how he would ponder and how he would reflect and how he would connect with the meaning of the Quran. Zuhri, who was one of the students of the Imam, he says, Kana Ali ibn al-Husayn alayhi salam, that when the Imam would recite the Quran, إِذَا قَرَأَ مَلِكِ يَوْمِ الدِّينِ, when he would get to the ayat of Maliki Yawmiddin, يُكَرِّرُهَا حَتَّى يَكَادُ يَمُوتُ. When the Imam gets to the portion in Surah Fatiha, Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Lord of the Day of Judgment, King of the Day of Judgment. Zuhri says the Imam would start repeating it, Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin. And he would repeat it over and over and over in such a way that it looked like he was about to die. That's how overcome he was by reflecting on the fact that, oh my gosh, Allah is Maliki Yawmiddin. He's the Lord of the Day of Judgment. One day I'll be standing in front of him. And he was so overwhelmed, he was so overcome by the thought of having to stand before Allah and answer for his deeds, that he would keep saying it over and over and over again until it looked like he was about to die. He was close to passing out. And not just one, but on a regular basis, this would happen. Right? Imagine if our infallible Imam is reciting Maliki Yawmiddin this way, then how should we be reciting Maliki Yawmiddin, those of us who have committed sins and made mistakes in our lives? Similarly, when he would get to the ayah where Allah says, Innani an Allah, surely I am Allah, your Lord. The narration says that the Imam would be completely overcome by reciting that. Innani an Allah. Allah is talking to me directly and saying, I am surely Allah, your God. That this ayat would be so heavy on the Imam. Reciting this would have such an impact on the Imam that people would wonder what's happening, what's wrong with him, why is the color of his face changing? Why does he look like he's about to pass out over here? Right? This shows, what does this tell us? It shows someone that who has internalized the Quran, someone who's not just reciting and parroting in a very beautiful, eloquent way. Yeah, he did that too. He recited in a very beautiful and eloquent way, but he was also reflecting, he was also engaging with the meaning of the Quran. And so it's very important for us to not just recite the Quran, but the importance of pondering as we recite, the importance of understanding the Quran. And there's a lot of tafasir that are available for us now, right? A lot of resources that are available. Many volumes of Tafsir al-Mizan, for example, have been translated into English. Enlightening commentary of the Quran by Ayatollah Faqih Imami, the entire series is available online in English. There's tons and tons of lectures that have been done by renowned scholars on the tafsirs of different surahs, especially when it comes to, for example, like the 30th juz, or for example, Surah Yasin or Surah Rahman or Surah Waqi, or these famous surahs. There's dozens of lectures that are available online that we can listen to in order to improve our understanding of the Quran. Right? We have our own tafsir program with LFC as well, where again the intent is the same, is to improve our understanding of the Holy Quran. So there's a lot of those resources that are available for us, even if we don't speak Farsi or Arabic. And if you do understand Farsi and Arabic, then of course it's unlimited in terms of the resources available. But even if you don't, even if English is your only option, then there's a lot of resources now available in English online for free, for us to improve our understanding of the Holy Quran, so that when we recite with understanding and with proper ma'rifah. And the third, third area when it comes to our relationship with the Holy Quran, which unfortunately is really lacking among followers of Ahlul Bayt, unfortunately, is the issue of memorization. Right? This is again something that we sort of dismiss, and we say, "Oh, this is something," as if this is not something that is important for Ahlul Bayt followers to do. It's something that's important for people of other mazhabs. It's not important for us, right? No, that's not how it works, right? The memorization of the Quran is just as important. Our imams are the ones who are Quran and not anyone else's imams. Therefore, we have a greater obligation. We should have a greater emphasis on memorization and attachment to the Quran than anyone else. So the narration tells us, "Alayka bil Quran, fa inna Allah khalaqa al Jannah." The narration says that Allah has created paradise, وَجَعَلَ دَرَجَاتِهَا عَلَى قَدْرِ آيَاتِ الْقُرْآنِ. And one of the criteria for the different levels and different stations in paradise has to do with ayat of the Quran. فَمَنْ قَرَأَ الْقُرْآنِ. Then therefore, those who recite the Quran on the Day of Judgment, قَالَ لَهُ, it will be said to them, اقْرَأ وَأْرَقْ. Recite and ascend. Recite and go further up and up. وَمَنْ دَخَلَ مِنْهُمُ الْجَنَّةَ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِي الْجَنَّةِ أَعْلَى دَرَجَةً مِنْهُ مَا خَلَى النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ. Therefore, the higher that a person would like to go in paradise, the more that's going to be contingent on how much Quran they have memorized. Again, that's not the only criteria. You have to do your prayer and fasting and take care of your parents and not backbite. We know all those things, right? But one of the criteria that is required in order to advance to higher levels of paradise has to do with how much Quran we have memorized. And it'll be said to us on the Day of Judgment, okay, recite and you can go up. The more you can recite, the further up you can go. So that's again another area where unfortunately we as followers of Ahlul Bayt are unfortunately very lacking, and something that we should take seriously and think about how we can improve it. There are many practical methods, for example, that are mentioned. One method that's been mentioned is at least we start with the short surahs, right? Start from the back and work on the 30th juz, for example, and do maybe one ayat a day. So instead of trying to memorize a whole surah in one day, I try one ayat a day, right? And then it maybe takes me 2 weeks to learn a surah. Okay, no problem. After 2 months, I'll have 4 surahs memorized, right? Or for example, listening to the audio, playing it in the background when I'm driving, when I'm doing things, just having that same surah playing on loop over and over. And over time, it gets stuck in your head. There's a very good book by Shahid Mutahari, rahmatullah alayh, where he talks about this issue of memorizing the Quran. And he says the Quran is a book that was meant to be memorized. In other words, it's a very easy book to memorize. Right? The Quran is not difficult to memorize. Allah has made it in a way that it actually makes it easy to memorize this book. All we have to do is we have to make the intention, we make the effort, and a lot of it can happen very, passively, right? Just play it over, that same surah over and over and over in your car while you're driving. 30 minutes a day, you listen to that surah, 10, 15 times. After 2 weeks, that surah is going to pretty much be stuck in your head, right? These little things that we can do here and there to memorize the Quran, right? Or for example, some of the famous ayat of the Quran, right? We should all try to make sure that we have, for example, ayat al-Tathir, the verse of purification, memorized. Or the ayat of Wilaya, the verse of guardianship, memorized. Or the verse of Ghadir, both the before and after, memorized. Right? Or some portions of Surah Al-Dahr, when the Panjatan gave the food away to the miskin and the yatim and the asir for 3 days. Some of these crucial and critical ayat of the Quran, we should try our best to make sure we have them memorized, because they have a lot to do with our aqidah as well. So that's the third area that inshallah we can try to focus on when it comes to our relationship with the Quran. And lastly, most importantly, the goal of all of this is what? The goal of all of this is to help us internalize the Holy Quran. right? In one of the du'as in Sahifa Kamila, our fourth Imam teaches us, he says, Allahumma fa'idh afattana al-ma'unata ala tilawatih wa sahhalta jawasi al-sinatana bihusni ibaratih. Oh Allah, since you gave me the ability to recite this Quran, and since you beautified my tongue by giving my tongue the tawfiq of reciting the Quran, therefore, فَجْعَلْنَا مِمَّنْ يَرْعَاهُ حَقَّ رِعَايَتِهِ. Make me among those who observe their obligations toward the Quran. وَيَدِينُ لَكَ بِاعْتِقَادِ التَّسْلِيمِ لِمُحْكَمِ آيَاتِهِ. And make me among those who obey the ayat, who obey the commands of the Quran. وَيَفْرَعُ إِلَى الْإِقْرَارِ متشابه وموضحات بيناته. And also protect me from being among those who take the ambiguous and unclear verses of the Quran and try to interpret it on their own without the proper knowledge and understanding. So again, there's obviously much more to be said in this regard, but in the interest of time, since we're getting close to Maghrib time, inshallah, we will stop there. May Allah give us the ability, may Allah give us the strength to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet and his family. May Allah give us the ability to internalize the message of the Holy Quran. May Allah give us the ability to recite the Quran on a regular basis. May Allah give us the ability to learn about the meanings and the translation and the tafsir of the Quran. And may Allah give us the ability, thirdly, to focus on this area of memorization of the Holy Quran. Just a few minutes of musibat and then we will conclude with azadari. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifinaik. Alayka minni salamullahi abadan ma baqitu wa baqiya al-layl wa an-nahar. Wa la ja'alahu Allahu akhir al-ahd minni li ziyaratikum. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn. وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Tonight is said to be the first night of the month of Safar, if the moon were to be seen. The first of Safar, according to narrations, is when the prisoners of Karbala were brought into Damascus. After having been to Kufa and having traveled through what is present-day Syria, they arrive in Damascus. The narration says that the people of Damascus, the scene was very different from Kufa versus Damascus. In Kufa, there were people who were scared to help Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but ultimately they knew that what had happened was tragic. So there was some level of sympathy that the people of Kufa had. But when it comes to Sham, these are the people who had grown up under the propaganda of Banu Umayyah. These people were crowded in the streets and they were celebrating as if it was a day of festival. They were laughing, they were jeering, they were congratulating each other. They were saying this is a day of barakah, this is a day of blessing for us, for the day that these rebels were put down by our noble Khalifa. The narration says that as the prisoners are brought and made to wait outside the doors of Damascus, Bibi Kulsum alayhi salam, she says to Shimr, she says, "O Shimr, we have two requests. The first of our requests is that you let us enter the city through one of the doors where there are fewer people, so that mahrams do not look at the daughters of Ali and Fatima. And our second request is that you keep the heads of the prisoners away from us, so that the people will look at the heads and they will not look at us, and they will be distracted and they will not be staring at us. But look at this wretched man. He purposely tells the soldiers to take the heads where the women were, and he tells them to pass through Bab-e-Halab, where the crowd was the greatest and the biggest." Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam, he narrates and he says that 7 injustices, 7 things were done against us in Sham. 7 things were done against us in Sham that didn't happen anywhere else to us. He says the first of these things is that we were surrounded on all sides The enemy had their swords drawn. They would beat the drums and they were dancing around us and they would strike us with their spears and swords and injure us. He says the second injustice is that they carried the heads of the shuhada right next to the women. The heads of my father Hussein and my uncle Abbas were right in front of my aunts Bibi Zainab and Bibi Kulsum. And the heads of my brother Akbar and Qasim were right in front of my sisters. Imagine seeing the head of your young brother right in front of your eyes. And then to make it worse, the Imam says they would play with the heads, they would disrespect them, they would throw them on the ground, they would kick them around, they would trample them under the horses. All the while the sisters could see. He says the third injustice that happened to us is that as we went through the streets of Sham, as we went through the bazaar of Damascus, the people of Sham threw hot water and they threw fire at us. He says the fourth injustice is that from morning to evening, they would drag us through the bazaar, through the marketplace, and they would tell people, they would say, these prisoners have no hurma, these prisoners have no respect, they have no sanctity. You can come and push them, you can bother them, you can kick them, you can hit them, you can do whatever you want to them. They have no respect, they have no sanctity. He says the fifth injustice that was done to us is that they tied us in ropes and they took us through a Jewish and Christian neighborhood. And they made an announcement and said, come take revenge. These are the descendants of the one who killed your ancestors at Khaybar. These are the descendants of Ali. He says the sixth injustice is that they took us to a slave market and they tried to sell us as slaves. But Allah saved us from that injustice. And he says the seventh injustice is that they kept us in a prison where there was no roof. So in the summers, we were exposed to the heats and we were exposed to the icy winds in the winter. And that is why when Imam Sajjad was asked, what is the worst thing that happened to you? He didn't say that the worst thing was watching the body of my cousin Qasim trampled to pieces. He didn't say the worst thing was watching the spear in the chest of my brother Akbar. He didn't say the worst thing was watching the neck of my baby brother pierced with a 3-prong arrow. He didn't say that the worst thing was the arms of my uncle being severed. Yes, these were all difficult for the Imam. But when he's asked, what is the worst thing that happened to you? All he says is Asham, Asham, Asham. ألا ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. يا حسين.
السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين پیر اگر گشتم به چشمم کربلا را دیدم پیر اگر گشتم به چشمم کربلا را دیدم بین خیمه ریز ریز ماجرا را دیدم آب اگر خوردم به کامم مثل زهری تلخ شد اگر خوردم به کامم مثل زهری تلخ شد از خر خشکیده کام بینوا را دیدم شب جمعه است، آخرین شب جمعه ماه محرم. خوش به حال اونایی که تو حرم آقا بودن هستن، اونایی که بین الحرمین رو دیدن. چند خط ذکر مصیبت رو بر سینه بزنیم. Let's beat on our chest for a few minutes. Standing in Bain al-Haramain, facing the dome of Imam Hussein, shouting with tears rolling down my face. Sallallahu alayka ya Hussein. Sallallahu alayka ya Hussein. Remembering the first of baby, Imam asked them for some mercy. Instead of water, they caused more pain. Sallallahu alayka ya Hussein. Sallallahu alayka. On the other side, Dome of Abbas, the hero of the earth and skies, the thirsty flag bearer of Hussein. Sallallahu alayka ya Hussein. Sallallahu alayka. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي علت بفنائك، عليك مني سلام الله. أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتك. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. نسألك اللهم ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم العز الجل الكرم، إلهي بحق آقا عبد الله الحسين، آقا زين العابدين، يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مغلب القلوب، ثبت قلوبنا على دينك، واكفنا يا قاضي الحاجات ويا كافي الهمات، إنك مجيب الدعوات، إنك على كل شيء قدير، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على. Brothers and sisters, inshallah, because of Azan, we're going to take a break and we'll start the Dua Kumayl at 7:35, inshallah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأته. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد عملي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعد أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا مغرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني.
ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وصالح برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انتوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضع لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، فتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نتغاد بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادما، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حمت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعد الأوثان تعبدك طاعة، وإشارة باستغفارك مذنب، ما كذبنا النبي ولا أخبرنا بفضلك يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب وأنت تعلم ضعفي غليلا من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوب يسير مغار قصير مدته فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الذليل الفقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي يا ربي وسيدي ومولاي أي الأمور إليك شكوك ولما منها ضج وابكي لأليم العظام والشدة أملة البلاء ومدته فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائي وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك وابني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وابني صبرت على مر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي يفوت فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذنجن إليك بين ضجيج الآبرين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك إن كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين
يا غياث المستغيثين ويا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يدج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوتا وترى مكانا أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقتأ لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدعا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تحب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أصررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وهالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قوي على خدمتك جواره، واشدد على العزيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك ذنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بالسوء فارد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لحجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني يطرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره الشفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من راس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. السلام. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
زيارة وارث، زيارة آقا أبا عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثار والمتر الموتون. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله واتعاك اليمين. ولعن الله أمة غتلت ولعن الله أمة ظلمت ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فلم يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلمسك من مظلمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام المرتقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأمة من ظلك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والهجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن. شرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سر وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. أبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله. أبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل السماوات والأرض. فلعن الله أمة أسرجت والجمال وتهيأت لقتالك. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. أسأل الله بالشأن الذي لك وبالمال الذي لك لدي أن يصلي على محمد وآل محمد وأن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 من يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع السلام.